I'm Jana McElroy, and I'm on the member of the Art Committee. And I'd like to introduce our speaker today. His name is Oner Ozturk, which he said is pretty close to the correct pronunciation. He's an assistant professor of art at Columbia College, and he lectures on the art of Islam, art and ritual, and rethinking museums, among other things. He's originally from Ankara, Turkey. He got his master's in architecture from the Middle East Technical University in Ankara in 2002. In 2013, he got his PhD in art history from the University of Texas at Austin. His research primarily focuses on art and architecture of medieval Asia Minor and modern Turkey. He has many other interests, including Roman provincial art and culture, art and politics, architectural illustration, and digital reconstruction. He's also the primary editor of the book Deconstructing the Myths of Islamic Art, which was published in 2022. He's also a huge fan of Dali's work, and he's excited to discuss some of the recent discoveries about his favorite Dali works at the Art Institute, other museums, and in private collections. His talk today is titled An Introduction to Dali and the Image Disappears, which is an exhibition that will be on display at the Art Institute until June 12th. I'd like to welcome Oner Ozturk and ask you please to silence your cell phones.
All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon, distinguished guests. This is such a young, energy-filled room. I'm so delighted to spend this afternoon with you. You think I'm joking, but I'm really inspired by your energy. I'm really inspired by your experiences. I had so wonderful conversations during the lunch, and I am excited to talk about Dali today. Are you excited? Yes. Awesome. So, first of all, very quickly, thank you, Jenna, for a wonderful introduction and also arranging this visit in the first place. I really appreciate Renee and Becky's help as I was setting up for today, and many thanks to the 19th Century Charitable Association for inviting me. As an Oak Park resident, I am delighted to be a part of this important Monday enrichment series. I hope I provide an enriching experience, which is a lot of pressure. Now I'm feeling nervous about it. Before we jump into all of that, however, with a somber note and the kind permission of the 19th Century Charitable Association, I would like to take a moment to recognize the devastating earthquake that hit my home country, Turkey, and our neighbor, Syria. As you may know, more than 50,000 people lost their lives, and millions are now without their homes. Bridge to Turkey, which is shown here on the screen, is a US-based charity organization that has been doing great work to help survivors from day one. So please consider donating to them if you can, and thank you. So, going back to Dali and the Image Disappears, this exhibition, believe it or not, is the first Dali exhibition of the Art Institute ever. It is the first devoted to the Spanish Surrealists, presenting more than 30 paintings, drawings, photographs, and Surrealist objects, as well as a rich selection of books, magazines, letters, and such to let us discover the emergence of Dali as the inventor of his personal brand of Surrealism during the pivotal decade of the 1930s. So I'm excited. I'm excited because loans from all over the world with Dali's work from various departments of the museum will really help us to contextualize some of the most famous artworks of Dali in the collection, Particularly my favorites, The Invention of the Monsters and the Venice De Milo with Rovers. I'm very grateful to Kathleen Haskell, Gary C., and Francis Comer, curator, modern art and contemporary art at the Art Institute of Chicago, and her team for providing materials for me as I have been getting ready for this lecture. Kathleen worked with Jennifer Cohen as co-curator. Jennifer is the curator of provenance and research at the Art Institute, and they created this wonderful exhibition together. Before we jump into details of the exhibition, however, let's talk a little bit about Dali becoming Dali. He was born on May 11, 1904, as my goofy gift kind of reminds you, in Figueres, very close to France. Here is the French border, and the Mediterranean coast, which is, of course, right here. As you may know, Figueres is in the province of Catalonia. So Dali was a Catalan. In fact, Figueres means fig trees in Catalan. Scholars believe the location and the landscape of Dali's birthplace had a significant impact on him. Here is a picture of the family by Joseph Pichot. You can see his aunt Maria Teresa, his mother, his father, and Salvador Dali, looking pretty nice right there, right? Aunt Caterina and sister Ana Maria, who will be Dali's stepmother shortly after the death of her mother. Complicated, I'm not going there. And grandmother Ana. The Dali family spent their holidays in the picturesque town Cadaqués, beside the sea and beneath the mountains. It was from coastal Cadaqués, rather than inland Figueres, that Dali derived his greatest inspiration. And you will see that especially in the landscapes of many surrealist paintings we will explore today. Dali was interested in painting from a very early age. Here is a lovely piece from his childhood years with an impressionist approach. You can kind of see the trees, the house, in the foreground, some of the grass and the clouds, right? As he was emerging out as an artist, eventually studying in Madrid and Paris, his early work displayed the influence of various European masters. Sometimes, quite literally, as in the case of self-portrait with a Raphaelesque neck, that's also the title of the work, or more stylistically, as in this example of titled Cubist Self-Portrait, which is right here. His obsession with other Picasso styles continues for a few more years, particularly after visiting Paris in 1926, but eventually he finds his jam with Surrealism. He joins the Surrealists in 1929, but he was already experimenting as early as 1927. This included experimenting with the deep space of Giorgio de Chirico and Max Ernst, and extensive readings of psychoanalytic books, including Freud's Interpretation of Dreams and Richard Freiherr von Krafft-Ebing's Sexual Psychopathy, a clinical forensic study, also known as Psychopathia Sexualis. Dali joins the movement in a period of crisis and division. So he's kind of like the fresh blood. Everybody, not everybody, but most of them welcome him. This was also a time of significant changes in Dali's own life. Here, he is with a shaved hat and a sea urchin on his head. His relationship with his father was never good, but his affair with Gala, seen here, originally married to surrealist poet Paul Eluard, and 10 years older than artists, faced strong opposition, and he was banished from the family until the end of the Spanish Civil War. In response, Dali shaved his hat and buried his hair on the beach of Cadaqués before going to Paris with Gala. He becomes the new blood of the Surrealists, bringing fresh energy to the group. This is a perfect match. Now he could express himself, putting on the canvas all his inner desires, fears, and anxieties. And at least for the first few years, he's very much welcome in this group, although it gets complicated later, as you may find out. Arguably, one of the most important famous paintings of this era from Dali is The Persistence of Memory, now in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. It was unveiled in 1932. The painting captures a number of melting and decaying clocks in a plain landscape with some hills of coastal Catalonia in the background. Dali explained, quote, "My whole ambition in the pictorial domain is to materialize the images of my concrete irrationality with the most imperialistic fury of precision." He's very good with words, very poetic in many ways. This was Dali. He painted objects, most familiar ones, in unfamiliar ways. The soap watches were an unconscious symbol of the relativity of space and time, a dismantling of our notions of a fixed cosmic order. And on an interesting note, of course, this is directly related with Einstein's relativity, theory of relativity, and his interest in always contemporary science. This is a very famous but tiny painting, which is unfortunately, and I'm totally teasing you here, I'm sorry about that, not a part of our exhibition at the Art Institute of Chicago. So as I was finalizing my talk, I flew to New York just for you and made sure it is there. And it's kind of funny because as I was documenting the movement, many visitors came here and realized, whoa, yeah, this painting is here. And by the way, this is much smaller than I would ever imagine it to be. But again, a lovely painting that you are not going to see in Chicago this spring, but you can always fly to New York, right? That's a really nice, quick trip. But anyways, our exhibition actually brings together some fascinating paintings and other artworks together, and may even help us to understand this iconic painting further. Beginning with works of Dali, created as a member of the Surrealist group in Paris, the first gallery presents a radical type of painting and found object sculpture charged with the psychological resonance of dreams. The central gallery, focusing on mid-1930s, and by the way, the whole exhibition is about Dali and the 1930s, focuses on a new kind of painting that Dali called Paranoia critical methods. These works bait viewers into searching for meaning in inherently unstable pictures. And you will see what I mean in a few minutes. The final gallery explores the artist's interdisciplinary and immersive installation for the 1939 World's Fair, The Dream of Venus Pavilion, his final project during the 1930s. Constantly shifting artistic identity and always the showman, Dali kept audiences marveling, questioning, and searching for nearly a century. So this exhibition invites us to look at his work becoming really the signature work of Dali in the 1930s. Let's start looking at some of the works you will see at the exhibition. In the very first room, one of the paintings is this one that is titled Premature Ossification of a Railway Station, poetic, 1930. This is one of the earliest dated paintings of the exhibition, and here you can see, right there, one of his melting and misshapen clocks. Dali referred to these clocks as the camembert of time, the soft, yummy French cheese. The melting clock here contrasts with the precise perspective of the painting, as well as the hardness, therefore the term ossification, the natural process of bone formation implied by the title. For Dali, soft forms like this could introduce an uncomfortable slippage between various appetites, from aesthetic to culinary to sexual. In the background, we also see two high-heeled shoes. there. Throughout the 1930s, such shoes continued to appear in the artist's work, often serving as stand-ins for Gala, the woman who would become his muse, alter ego, and later his wife. A topic that captured Dali's attention during this period is the story of William Tell. And there are actually 3 major paintings Dali painted on this subject matter, but this is the one you will see in the exhibition in the very first room. And by the way, as a quick note, the colors are almost impossible to capture in digital photography for Dali. So here's another reason for you to see this in person at the Art Institute, because they never get it wrong, or get it right. Dali's color changes just is not a match for the current digital technology for some reason, which is quite mind-blowing if you think about it. I'm sure you know the story. Tell was the Swiss folk hero who risked the life of his own son, not nice, by shooting the famous apple placed on the boy's head. And in Dali's version, he becomes a castrating father, violently opposed to the intrusion of a married woman in Gala Alois in young Salvador Dali's life. Have you noticed the absence of a bow? Where is the arrow? Where is the apple? Right? In Dali's imagination, Tell became a metaphor for his father and son relationship. One of the ideas Dali borrows from Sigmund Freud is something called castration anxiety. Castration anxiety is a psychoanalytic concept introduced by Freud to describe a boy's fear of loss or damage to the genital organ as punishment for incestuous wishes towards the mother and murderous fantasies toward the rival father. Although the scissors, which are right here, imply castration, the collage fig leaf obscuring the son's body make it impossible to see whether the act is impending or complete. The scene also has an Abraham versus God vibe, the moment of sacrifice, the gesture. The hands here also remind us some of Michelangelo's creation of Adam in the Sistine Chapel. Notice the soft piano and the swarming ants that come back in later examples. And again, Dali keeps coming to the same motifs in different compositions. The large and vivid painting also foreshadows Dali's complicated relationship with his artistic and intellectual father figure, the leader of the Surrealist movement, André Breton, who was the painting's first owner and who kept it throughout his life, although their relationship later got a little complicated with Dali. Around this time, as early as 1931, Dali also started creating small, really cute, small, intimate portraits of Gala. These were based on a photo of the couple at the beach, while Gala appears to be relaxing, at least in the colorful version. The opposing side is decorated with broken buildings and other stone items. And here you even see this boy with a hoop, which is stick and hoop that boy reappears in a number of Dali paintings as well. However, the artist replaced his hand on her shoulder with a pair of raw chops. This culinary detail implies that one might, quote, be able to actually eat the object of desire, end quote, as Dali memorably put it. Dali says, quote, as soon as we had got settled in Port Ligat, I painted a portrait of Gala with a pair of raw chops poised on her shoulder. My edible, intestinal, and digestive representation at this period assume an increasingly insistent character. I wanted to eat everything, and I planned the building of a large table made entirely of hard-boiled eggs so that it could be eaten. So he experiments that quite a while, and we will see different variations of this in this exhibition, and you can also see in other works. In this colorfully painted version, we know he really liked it because he reportedly tied it to his person for safekeeping during his first transatlantic crossing from Europe to United States. Decades later, Dali created this crimson velvet and gilt frame for the display of the piece for his museum in Figueres, Spain. And this frame, my friends, is the coolest frame of the entire exhibition. So it's so cool to see in person. And also, I have to say, our curators and our colleagues at the Art Institute paid special attention to frames and created close reconstructions of the other frames for our permanent examples in the collection as well. So there's a lot of attention to detail here. One of the wonderful, if not depressing, things about such exhibition is that they allow us to examine artworks with similar subject matters together. I'm saying it's depressing because sometimes those kind of unions are once in a lifetime kind of unions. They may not happen in our lifetime, so it's so cool to see them in person. It's also depressing because of the subject matter here, because here the image disappears brings together some of the most iconic paintings of Dali on the Spanish Civil War. In July 1936, a group of military rebels launched a coup against the so-called Popular Front government of left-wing and liberal parties, which had been recently elected to power in Spain. The failed uprising descended into a 3-year bloodbath, costing Spain almost 500,000 lives before Franco's rebellious nationalists declared victory in 1939. Interestingly, Dali painted this painting, Soft Construction with Boiled Beans, while living in Paris in early 1936. Too early, on the eve of the devastating Civil War, and cited his work as evidence of, quote, the prophetic power of his subconscious mind. And Dali does that a lot. He claims his paintings are always prophetic. It is a picture of a monster with a disturbing smile while connected in a violent altercation with another monster that appears to be two parts of the same creature. All over the background and on the parts of the monster are boiled beans. You can see some of that right there. That boiled beans that look like they are melting. Dali explains this decision, quote, the soft structure of that great mass of flesh in civil war, embellished with a few boiled beans, for one could not imagine swallowing all that unconscious meat without the presence, however uninspiring, of some mealy and melancholy vegetable. One of the most interesting aspects of this allegory of self-inflicted carnage is that the monster roughly charts the map of Spain. And here's my little Photoshop contribution to that. Dali interpreted the Spanish conflict in psychoanalytic terms, and he included an homage to Sigmund Freud by including a tiny cute portrait of Freud right here, inspecting the gnarled hand at the lower left of the composition. Soft construction with boiled beans reminds me of another painting the Art Institute has in its collection, and that is Vasily Kandinsky's Improvisation No. 30, also known as Cannons. And you may remember this on the 3rd floor of the modern wing. Unlike Dali, however, Kandinsky did not claim in 1913 any prophetic abilities, admitting, quote, the presence of the cannons in the picture could probably be explained by the constant war talk that has been going on throughout the year. I have to admit, these paintings make me a little nervous about the times we are in right now. Don't worry, I'm not a painter, so I'm not painting any prophetic painting for 2023. so you can relax, but it is kind of fascinating how artists internalize some of the tensions that is captured through the media at the time, which is eerily similar to what we have been experiencing today. So when the Spanish conflict started, Dali was in London, and he reflected, quote, "The chaos in Spain undid me, and the monsters of civil war found their way onto my canvases. The double being of the cannibalism of autumn was eating itself up and sucking my blood. My father was to be persecuted. My sister almost lost her mind. My church steeple would be razed, and countless friends would die. Doubt, nothingness, and the abjectness of hate were all about me." And on a quick note, I think it's important to mention that Dali had people suffering on both sides. And in that way, he also felt like he was split. He was that monster eating itself, fighting itself in that war. Self-construction with boiled beans is that one painting. Another one that is also in the exhibition is this one, which is called Autumnal Cannibalism. In this one, Dali captures these ideas in the form of a romantically entwined couple. You can see one right there, and then here, right? And this romantic couple, while enjoying each other's existence, they're also dining on each other's flesh on Spain's Emporta plain. The cannibalistic couple became a metaphor of war as a mutually destructive yet amorous act of consumption. This position was widely interpreted as neutral, Dali's position, cementing Dali's increased ideological distance from his surrealist peers who strongly supported the Republican left. But this is hardly surprising, as it seems like his sister had been imprisoned and tortured by the Republicans, and one of his best friends, Federico Garcia Lorca, was killed by the nationalists. As someone who's already torn apart by the Spanish Civil War, it is understandable that Dali got extremely nervous with the initial signs of World War II. This takes us to my favorite Dali painting in Chicago, Inventions of the Monsters. Dali made this painting during his stay in the Asturian Alps, literally months before the country was annexed by Germany. Capturing the anxiety and turmoil caused by the escalating conflicts across Europe, he depicted a barren landscape littered with hybrid figures. When the Art Institute acquired the painting, a few years later in 1943, Dali wrote the museum explaining the painting in detail and provided an enigmatic description. Quote, "According to Nostradamus, the appropriation of monsters presages the outbreak of war. The canvas was painted in the Semmering Mountains near Vienna a few months before the Anschluss." As you know, the union of Austria and Germany, the annexation of Austria by Germany, and has a prophetic character, he says. Horsewoman, right here, equal river monsters, flaming giraffe, I don't think I have to show that one, equals masculine apocalyptic monster, cat angel, equals divine heterosexual monster, hourglass equals metaphysical monster, it's right here, Gala and Dali equals sentimental monster, they're so adorable right there, and this little blue dog is not a true monster. Where is the blue dog? This Andalusian dog, right here, which is very difficult to see because it was designed to be difficult to see, okay? It was always like that. And that was actually one of the mysteries our curators wanted to look further into. And as they examined this painting, as in other paintings, they concluded that it was always intended to be a ghostly image, okay? And in this case, this transparent rendering makes it effectively disappear into the landscape. The Andalusian Dog is also the name of a silent movie directed by Luis Buñuel, which is widely available on social media now, and that was actually written by him and Dali. And now our curators also believe that it may be a veiled reference to his friend, Spanish playwright Federico Garcia Lorca. And this may have originated from a Spanish expression that is roughly translated as an Andalusian dog howls, someone had died. So there's this kind of funerary connection. My favorite part of the painting is the lovely rendering of Dali and Gala, the sentimental monster. Look at how they are deeply involved with their presence, while a sibling figure in the foreground appears with an hourglass and a butterfly, both symbols of the inevitability of death. Several preparatory drawings exist for this drawing. One of these is in the exhibition, and it shows Dali working to define the painting's double-headed woman by combining a profile and a frontal view. The deep receding perspective found in the painting is already suggested here by the small figure and the hill in the far distance, which is right there. Our colleagues at the Art Institute, including Robert Lifson, the senior photographer of the imaging department, captured technical images of Dali's invention of monsters. And these are pretty exciting because, as you know, this is one of our most favorite paintings, so it has been on permanent display forever. So this gave our colleagues a chance to examine and clean and photograph many of these work in our collection and figure out new things, find out new things. And here are some of those technical images. These are images, for instance, of the disappearing little blue dog by Robert Lifson using infrared light and ultraviolet light techniques. So you can see those ghostly image of the Andalusian dog a little bit better. There's also other discoveries, but you have to hold your breath for that. Not literally, but just a little bit. Meanwhile, Dali's fame in the US was increasing. Julian, Levy gallery had him for a solo show as early as 1934. He kept coming back, including a major one in 1939. And here you are looking at the original 1934 catalog that was also designed by Dali, so you can kind of see his little bit of his graphic design side of it. Again, melting clocks pop up here, as well as other familiar figures as well. The same year, Dali completed the invention of monster. He also became, actually the year before, he is already becoming popular in US. Time magazine makes him one of the covers here on the screen. And then the same year Dali completed the invention of monster, he also visited Chicago, including the Art Institute of Chicago, and posed in front of a chemist lifting with extreme precaution the cuticle of a grand piano. Long title. Looking dandy, as you can see. This is one of the things I don't like about talking about Dali, because it doesn't matter how dressed up I am. He will always look more dressed up than I am, and his hair will always look better, so I'm sorry, Dali, I can't compete with you. During his visit, Dali told a reporter that he intended to induce a feeling of malaise in the viewer, sickness, right? He expanded, quote, "It is impossible to ask for an explanation. I try to get the nearest to a certain things as in a dream." And I think, my friends, that's the essence of how Dali really captures surrealism. Because before Dali, surrealism was dancing around this kind of dreamy images and subconscious, but nobody really did a great job of capturing that in the painting. So he created, with the most detailed rendering, this bizarre combinations of things, unlikely things coming together. So that obviously fascinated people around the globe. Going back to this particular painting, couple of interesting things I want to mention here, because there is a set of fascinating but familiar sets of characters here. This includes his hometown pharmacist or chemist, right here, holding the, cheese-like piano. We have the German composer Richard Wagner right there, right? And a composite figure blending aspects of Swiss folk hero William Tell, surprise, surprise, former Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin, and Dali's own father. Where's that figure? It's right there. You see it? It appears right in the foreground. It's like another ghostly image. As our imaging team provides further evidence here, it's clear that the artist sketched and painted over, which is right here, a portrait of Wagner's patron, the 19th century King Ludwig II of Bavaria. Lacking the underpainting, this part of the painting results in textural differences that made the Mad King a ghostly presence. So this is a new discovery. This is something we didn't know about. And we may speculate why Wagner is there, his portrait disappears, but that's another lecture. I have to come back for that one, or you have to invite one of my colleagues for that one. During this tumultuous period of the mid-1930s, Dali also began exploring compositions around ambiguous two-way imagery, pictures that offer multiple and equally valid ways of perceiving what is being depicted. Naming it the Paranoia critical method, Dali proposed the notion of paranoia as a productive way of seeing, generating a proliferation of rational or irrational visions that might be harnessed by the mind. He embraced the notion, here in this case, the motif of a human face that doubled as an illusion of space, suggesting the complex interior weaves and exterior landscapes in its features. In the iconic collage of Mae West's face, which may be used as a surrealist apartment, another long title, the artist sourced an image of the American actress, singer, screenwriter Mae West from an advertisement of the 1933 film She Done Him Wrong, transforming her face into a domestic setting. The lip sofa, right here and right here, depicted here, was eventually produced by the designer Jean-Michel Franck in 1938 as a part of the paranoiac furniture Dali envisioned for his patron Edward James London townhouse. And this is one of the most fascinating things of Dali, because he inspired a lot of designers, furniture designers, fashion designers. There's collaborations, so that's quite interesting. But here is my favorite painting from this exhibition. Called A Preparation of Face and Fruit Dish on a Beach, is an extraordinary example of this visually ambiguous approach, centering on an image that oscillates between a classically proportioned human face and the high pedestal computer or fruit dish. And you can see right here the fruit dish, right, with the pears, and then the face appears. Right, you can start to see this face. Building on Dali's obsession on the edible, this painting is the pinnacle of Dali's commentary on art as a form of consumption. The Bowl of Pears prophetically invites viewers to quote-unquote digest the artwork, right? But here's the fascinating thing that really strikes you in the gallery. A fascinatingly detailed landscape with minute references to human destruction then turns into a dog. Do you guys see the dog? Right here. Oh, I like that. That's nice. So this is appearing and then disappearing. In fact, if you notice the color of the dog, right there, turns into bridges and roads. So that does really make you a little paranoid, like what am I looking at, how am I looking at. One of the things that really fascinated me is in this exhibition is recognition that Dali was obsessed with dogs. He has dogs in various ways. We already talked about Andalusian Dog. It's not a part of this exhibition, but you can always Google. There's actually him with his own dog, which is basically an Afghan dog. He later brought to the United States and stayed here. So we have photographs of him in the United States with his own dog. But obviously, this is not an Andalusian dog. This is not an Afghan dog. So I was asking to myself, why do I remember this dog? One of the suspicious things for me was looking at Adolf Hitler's dog, which was not this dog. Surprise, his dog was a German Shepherd. So, after a little bit of research, I found out that this is a dog I remember from this early photograph of Franco with his wife and as well as his daughter with her dog named Dick. I won't even go into like implications of that into that. But this is something fascinating. I may not be the first person who recognized this, so I am still looking into scholarship. I'm not a Dali specialist, so I'm curious about this to find out further. So feel free to email me in a few years and see where I stand with this. But I found that quite interesting. Finally, we come to the painting titled The Image Disappears, the name of the exhibition, yay, right? Hope you were not holding your breath for this moment. But it is another fascinating application of the Paranoia critical method. This one is my little image here shows you. It's actually based on Jan Vermeer's Woman in Blue Reading a Letter. And I personally think Vermeer had a lot of influence on Dali because it's a small scale, intimate lights and portraits. There are a lot of interesting similarities here. But obviously, Dali's is a great example of this Paranoia critical method because you also start to see this face. Are we all seeing the face here? This face is believed to be Spanish painter Diego Velázquez, who was the contemporary of Vermeer. So it's another great example of Dali's fascination with the European masters. And again, this exhibition brings drawings with paintings together and shows us how it was important for Dali to get these right. And in these two preliminary drawings, you can actually see the contrasting images of this two-way image. One is softly, the other one is tightly rendered. I think you can call Dali anything. I hear everything in the last month, people asking me about Dali. But I would argue that he was not lazy. Clearly, he was working on the most legible version of the Paranoiac vision, and he was clearly a perfectionist. That takes us to the final portion of the exhibition that is also connected with our country, specifically 1939 World Exposition in New York. In the late 30s, Dali started to favor the creation of whole environments and objects on a monumental scale combined with a performative element, very much ahead of his time in that regard. In 1939, with the assistance and support of his New York dealer, Julian Levy, he created a pavilion for New York's World Fair. Located in the amusement area of the fair, the installation incorporated huge reproductions of Leonardo's Mona Lisa and Botticelli's Birth of Venus. Obsession with masters again. And throughout the fair, they hired performers who would engage in these installations. Which connects us to our famous sculpture you may have seen before, Venice De Milo with Trovers. The idea of discovering Venus and her dream through an interactive process was not new to Dali. However, in 1936, he created Venice De Milo with Rovers, a half-size plaster reproduction of the famous marble sculpture from the Louvre Museum. But out altered it with drawers in the figures forehead, breast, stomach, abdomen, and left knee. Then in 1962, he added a set of pom-poms. I love the pom-poms. To the drawer, pulls forever, transforming the work through its evocative tactile implications. Dali was deeply influenced by Sigmund Freud's work. Content quote, the only difference between immortal Greece and contemporary times is Sigmund Freud, who considered that human body, purely Platonic in the Greek epoch, is nowadays full of secret drawers that only psychoanalysis is capable to open. Venice De Milo with the drawers is the three-dimensional culmination of Dali's exploration into the deep psychological mysteries of sexual desire, symbolized in the figure of the ancient goddess of love. When completed, the Dream of Venus included surrealist interiors with hung murals. So our painting, formerly known as the Visions of Eternity, was, and this is a recent discovery, in fact, only a portion of these murals. And part of the confusion started with the simple fact that our curators couldn't make sense of this painting as a single painting because it doesn't look like any of the Dali paintings. The painting style is different. It looks relatively empty. But now we know the reason, because it was not designed as an oil painting. It was actually part of a much bigger installation, the installation at the 1939 New York World Exposition. When completed, the Dream of Venus included surrealist interiors with hung murals, and this was one of the large panels, each around 2 meters, in other words, around 7 foot high, included some of the most recognizable motifs of Dali's art. Surprise, a melting clock, surprise, a burning draft, and they were also surrounded by actual physical objects. You can actually see umbrellas that Dali also likes and uses in a number of his works. Here are some photos of the Vogue article that promoted the pavilion in June 1939, also on display in the exhibition. Dali, however, was extremely frustrated with the process of building the pavilion. He felt like his artistic freedom was challenged. And here is the closest photograph I could find to a frustrated Dali from the Library of Congress archives. So I guess you should imagine him as I am telling you about his frustration. Dali was so frustrated that he actually left before the exposition was open, after a fight in New York, but I'm not even gonna go there. And then Dali composed a pamphlet. This pamphlet is so cool. So I have a barcode here if you want to read the whole thing. But he in this pamphlet, which he called Declaration of the Independence of the Imagination and the Rise of Man to His Own Madness, he talked about his frustration with the bureaucracy. He said this middleman of culture enraged him, and he was especially upset the fair's organizers rejected his controversial proposals. Part of the controversy happened because Dali did not want a regular, typical mermaid, right? He did not want a beautiful female upper torso and face with a fish tail. Guess what Dali wanted? He wanted the beautiful female body with a fish head. And he said in his quote, the first person who ever came up with this idea was the creator, but the second person who repeated that was a bureaucrat. And that's one of the things I like about Dali, because although I know how to deal with bureaucracy like Dali did, I hated bureaucracy as well. So kudos to Dali for that. Despite Dali's frustration, the installation successfully introduced Dali and Surrealism to a much bigger audience, maybe part of the reasons why we have a Dali talk today. And ironically, by the time Pavilion opened, the artist himself had disappeared abruptly, convenient for the title of the exhibition, and leaving behind many of his collaborators on this surrealist dream. The disappearance was rather short-lived. The artist continued to keep audiences marveling, questioning, and searching with his new body of work. As I conclude my talk, I'm inviting you to downtown, to the Artist of Chicago, to explore this fascinating exhibition, and maybe give Dali another chance to explore his and your own subconscious as we deal with so much going on in our own times, not that different from the 1930s. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for a few questions. Does anybody have a question?
Maybe too close.
I'm going to make a statement that his work is as fine as the great Northern European painters. I mean, he's an excellent and finely skilled artist.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would completely agree with you. And part of the reason I also associate with Northern Renaissance, at UT Austin, I was very lucky to take a course on Northern Renaissance, so that's one of the fields I feel connected to. I very much love Northern Renaissance artists. His interest in oil painting and that kind of small, realistically rendered detail is actually an old-fashioned thing for the time, right? So he's bringing all of that back. So he's very much knowledgeable with a lot of those artists. And keep in mind that he grew up in Spain. His early art career was in first Barcelona and then Madrid. In Madrid, if you have ever been to Prado Museum, that has an amazing collection of a lot of Northern artists. Some of the most iconic works of Northern Renaissance are actually in Madrid, Spain, because of the Kingdom of Spain. So he definitely studied and very much enjoyed those works. By the way, those works also have very interesting symbolic, sometimes even subconscious details. So it's not a surprise to me as well. So thank you for bringing that up. One of the things that was fascinating for me is a lot of Dali's paintings are small, and I forgot to point it out, but I scaled for you. If this is the persistence of memory in New York, this is the appropriation of face and fruit dish on a beach comparatively. So this is a much larger painting. So this exhibition actually brings us some large-scale Dali paintings, which are quite consuming. And that's part of the reason why it gets so crowded there very easily, because people cannot move. They're just stuck in front of those details, figuring out different things as they are engaging with these images. But thank you, that's a great comment.
You talked about his landscapes.
Yes.
I didn't see any.
So when we mention landscapes, we are talking about landscapes like this one, where the background is inspired from Cadaqués, specifically the beaches of Catalonia, but he's always integrating some surrealist elements to those landscapes. So those kind of traditional landscapes are very rare, and it is very early in his career, like the one I showed you. When he was a teenager, he painted that, for instance. But great question. I think he was definitely inspired by traditional landscape painting, but also in a kind of, revival method. He's bringing subject matter back to the landscape, right? So, very new fashion in an old-fashioned way, I guess. Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain why so much of it
Do you have a question?
Yes.
ended up in the unlikely place of St. Petersburg, Florida?
I think part of it is Dali was always interesting for collectors from the very beginning, right? And I'm even going to expand the question. In addition to Florida, I think it's interesting for us to ask why we have some of the best paintings of Dali in Chicago as well, right? And the answer is Dali is one of those artists who caught the attention of collectors, of museums from very early on. And there is good and bad in that, right? I have to mention as an art historian, because part of it is because artists like Dali was recognized by museums as this emerging artist, as well as collectors, right? As emerging artists, and people specifically targeted and purchased his work for major collections. In the case of the Art Institute, as you may know, we were the only museum in the United States that housed the Armory Show, because Americans were not ready that kind of modern art that caused a lot of controversy. But after the Armory Show, a Chicago wealthy financier, Joseph Winterbottom, gave the Art Institute of Chicago $50,000. So a significant portion of $50,000 was used to buy specifically works of emerging artists, including Pablo Picasso, Matisse, and Dali. Dali was definitely one of them. Of course, the downside of it, you can kind of see with that kind of support, these artists became famous and, captured a lot of the oxygen that could be shared with a lot of other artists too. So it's always interesting to think about if the museum supported other artists. I'm just putting there women artists, for instance, right? Maybe they could become as famous as some of these figures in the 1930s. And some of them did, right? Georgia O'Keeffe is a great example of that. So it is something interesting for us to think about in that process. Part of it is also, they are small, they can get along with a lot of interiors, so I think that may be one of the reasons as well. One more question, yes?
Thank you for your interesting talk, Owner.
Thank you.
I have a question. Could you say more about this concept of the clocks melting?
Yes.
And what it means for us today. And I just wanted to also say that if people want to see more about Dali,
Yes.
he's in this movie, Midnight in Paris. But it's a Woody Allen movie, and it's very, very interesting on Dali.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us that. So absolutely, one of the interesting things for Dali is he was very much aware of the scientific developments of the time. That's why I actually really like his work from late 40s and early 50s, because you can see his engagement with, particularly in a post-World War II, post-atomic bomb world, and how to deal with that in his paintings. And in his earlier work, like The Persistence of Memory, he is definitely inspired with people like Albert Einstein and the relativity theory, but it's also about the constructedness of things. I am constantly fascinated how Dali's concepts were actually much more relevant for postmodernism in a modern era. I think that was part of the reasons why he struggled with some of his colleagues at the time, because in many of his works, as he analyzed the deep subconscious, he also helped us to recognize the constructedness, the made-upness of a lot of these things around us. And one of them is the time, right? Time is something we try to put a number, make it tangible, make it recognizable. We organize everything around it. So I think he's challenging us with that. On an interesting note, I have to mention my colleagues picked these works specifically. These are their most beloved examples from 1930s Dali. But in this time period, he also has some work that would be considered kind of controversial, dealing with especially the rise of the Nazism in Germany. And a lot of that work was also misunderstood, because he was actually revealing that constructedness of a lot of things to people, which make people not that great, feel not that great, like a little nervous about many aspects of it. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm fascinated with that, because as an immigrant scholar, I am constantly fascinated by the political, social, cultural, religious constructs around me that are considered as the universal truths. And when I switch my countries, I see this different set of universal truths that are not universal, right? So I really enjoy, I think that's why his work at least is relevant to me. Obviously, I cannot talk about how you would feel about it, because I think one of the key things of Dali's work is inviting you as the viewers and engage with the work from your own point of view, your own experiences and desires and dreams. So I am, however, would be very interested to hear your opinions looking at some of these works. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank Dr. Osberg.